So in this discussion, we will talk about how do we interpret confidence interval for a proportion or for a mean. Now, however, we will not focus on how to calculate confidence interval. Rather, we will just try to interpret confidence interval after it has been calculated, or someone has stated a confidence interval, and how do we interpret that, or what's the meaning of that confidence interval. That is our focus of discussion today. Well, let's start talking about how do we interpret confidence intervals. Now first let's focus on how do we interpret confidence interval for a proportion. Proportion means we are trying to predict a percentage of people who does certain things, or proportion is basically a decimal version of percentage. So let's start with an example. Let us say we like to know the proportion of Valencia college students who are currently employed. It is almost an impossible task to find this proportion at a given time. And if we try to ask every student to find whether he or she is employed, it will take a while. During this time period, some students would have lost or gained employment. However, there exists a percentage or proportion of students that are employed at a present time. Although we couldn't really know exactly what that number is, we could be able to predict between what percent of the students could be employed at a given time. So to predict this proportion, we use statistical procedures and calculate confidence interval. Let's assume our confidence interval for the proportion of Valencia Community College who are currently employed at 95% confidence level is 0.7 and 0.8. In other words, we are thinking about 70 to 80% of students are currently employed. However, is that the right interpretation, or we are really meant something by saying the confidence interval is 0.7 to 0.8? So what actually this 0.7 to 0.8 or 70% to 80% means in a statistical sense? What this interval actually means is, we don't know exactly the proportion of students who are currently employed at this time, but based on our sample, we are 95% confident that the proportion that we are looking for, or proportion of Valencia Community College students who are currently employed, is a number that is somewhere between 0.7 and 0.8. In other words, we are not saying between 70 to 80% of students are employed. We are only saying there is a number that exists at any given time, but the number is a number that is between 0.7 to 0.8. So in other words, if we really find out 72% of the students are currently employed, our interval is predicting the right thing. Or if we find out 81% of the students are currently employed, then our interval did not predict the right proportion. So all what we are saying is the right proportion, or the percent of students who are currently employed, is a number that is between 0.7 and 0.8. There are a few things that we need to notice here. First of all, what we have predicted is the population proportion. Of course, whenever we are calculating confidence intervals, we use samples to predict confidence interval. So this is about the population proportion first. That's the first thing that you had to notice. Of course, we use the sample to predict the population proportion. Second, if you notice that we have used something called a confidence level. So we said in our previous example, 95% confidence level. So what is this 95% confidence level means, or 95% confidence means? What that means is we are 95% confidence about the prediction, and there is 5% chance that the true population proportion may not be within the calculated confidence interval. In other words, there is 95% chance that our calculated confidence interval will include the correct proportion that we are seeking to find. The third thing, or third idea that we need to notice is this prediction is not about the sample. So this has to be very clear here. We use samples to predict the population. So we are not predicting anything about the sample. And we do exactly know what the sample is all about. In that particular whatever sample that we used, we do know what proportion of students who are currently employed. So we have to be very careful here when you're interpreting confidence interval. Based on our sample, we are predicting the population proportion. Now let's look at another example here. This time, let's say I'm looking for the percent of students or proportion of students who graduate from Valencia Community College within 2 years. So let me just put some numbers here. So let's say the confidence interval for proportion of students who graduate from Valencia Community College within 2 years is 0.6 to 0.7. And this time I'm going to say my confidence level is 90%. In other words, I'm 90% confident that the proportion of students who graduate from Valencia Community College within 2 years is between 0.6 and 0.7. So what does this actually mean? Well, the students who graduate from Valencia Community College, or the percent of students who graduate from Valencia Community College at a given period of time, is a number that we don't know exactly what that is, but it is somewhere between 0.6 and 0.7. So it could be maybe 61% or 62% or 63, or whatever the percent is, but we are saying we are 90% confident that the number is supposed to be a number between 0.6 and 0.7. So I hope these two examples that I have talked about or illustrated will explain or at least give an idea how to interpret confidence interval for a proportion. Now let us turn our attention to interpret a confidence interval for a mean. Now to start with, let us say that we like to predict the average income per week of a Valencia College student. And let us assume the calculated confidence interval at 95% level is $250 and $400. Now the question is, what this confidence interval means. First of all, we have to talk about 95% confidence level here. What that means is we are 95% confident or sure, or 95% of the time we are expecting the true mean is going to be between these two numbers. So what this confidence interval really means? What that means is we are 90% confident that the average income of a Valencia College student is between $250 and $400. So what this exactly means, meaning like a $250 and $400, will that mean that all the students who attend Valencia Community College, students who make between $250 and $400, or it is the 95% of the students who make between $250 or $400? We are not talking about any individual student here. We are talking about the average. In other words, if I add all of those income numbers for each of those students and add them and divide it by how many students we have an average. That number, the average number, is going to be a number that is between 250 and 400. We don't know exactly what that number is, but what we do know is that average income, average from all the students who attend Valencia College, is a number that is going to be between $250 and $400. When we say this, we are 90% confident of that. In other words, there is 90% chance that actual average is going to be a number between $250 and $400. So let's say if someone makes a comment saying that the average income of a VC student is less than $410. If someone says this, did he make the right comment? Of course, definitely. Our calculated confidence interval is $250 and $400. So 410 is definitely less than the highest number that we have. Now, what about if someone say the average income is, let's say, $350? Will that be a right statement? Again, $350 is definitely within that confidence interval, but it doesn't mean that the average income is definitely something like $350. It is possible for the real average income to be a number less than $350 because our confidence interval starts from $250 to $400. So it could be any number. Even if it worked out to be $251, we are making the right statement. So if someone says the average income is $350, he is not making the correct prediction. So what about if someone says the average income is more than $240? Definitely he is making the right statement. So it is not only to really interpret confidence interval, but when you interpret, you should feel that what we are interpreting. So again, this is all about the population. It is not about the samples. So I hope this discussion would have given you a little bit better understanding of how to interpret confidence intervals for a proportion or a mean. And when we have time later on, we can talk about how to interpret confidence interval for difference of proportions or difference of means in a later time.